Good afternoon. It's been interesting today listening to the obviously the theme of the conference being revolution, and today we've heard various speakers talking about the technologies that are driving this latest iteration of the aviation revolution. We've also heard everybody say at some point, that aviation has been in a constant state of revolution almost. We've had from the Wright brothers powered flight, the 747 Jumbo, Concorde only 50 years ago. Each of those technological revolutions being driven by a purpose, whether that's higher, bigger, faster, or further. And of course, looking at the conversations that have been going on today, you might say that the purpose of this latest generation of revolution is environmental. We can reduce our impact on the environment through the application of electric and hybrid technologies. And of course, we've also just in the previous presentation, it was mentioned that DOCs, the operating costs of these things, will have a significant effect on our businesses, and something which we really need to think about. Because actually, the thing that makes a revolution truly revolutionary is actually finding that purpose, but also finding the audience for that purpose. We need to combine the two if it's going to have a lasting impact. And we can see that. Look at aviation. Look at Concorde. 50 years ago, the speed of sound, truly revolutionary. However, the payload was tiny. The cost of operating it was extremely high. The noise, the environmental impact was extremely high. The audience was very limited, and therefore, over time, it became not a realistic operational sort of proposition. The Airbus A380, again, it was mentioned earlier, revolutionary mechanical and technological achievement, 450 plus passengers, intercontinental distances. But while it was being developed, the world changed. It had 4 big engines on it, burning hydrocarbons at a rate of knots. The cost was too much. The airlines couldn't find a way of making money out of it, and we're now seeing which way the A380 market's going. So for the purpose of today, I want to focus on that audience, the people who are going to use this revolutionary technology we're talking about. And specifically, I'm going to look at the business traveller rather than urban mobility. So I want to talk about that intercity rather than the intracity space. And as the slide says, actually, if we use this right, then really we can deliver power to the people with the latest revolution. So look at this picture. One of the titles on the title of the presentation was about putting passenger in the centre of the value chain. Look at this guy here. Your typical, maybe typical businessman, businesswoman, in a queue. Look at the body language. You really don't need a PhD in body language to get the sense of his frustration, the slumped shoulders, just a resigned acceptance to his fate. The waste of time, the lack of privacy, the check-in queue, the security queue, then there's another queue for the elevators. Just total lack of control over your own environment. All the things that, just look at that, all the things you really could be doing better with your time right now than standing in that queue. And yet, what alternatives for the business travellers do we actually offer? Just think about that for a moment and park it. Because before we look at those alternatives, I just want to look at a couple of trends around business aviation. Business is changing fundamentally. Utilising the digital environment, we now live in a world where it's possible to trade globally from practically anywhere. SMEs 30 years ago, 20 years ago were confined to a sort of geographic area which was relatively small and based upon their ability to project their product or their service to that area. That's gone. Increasingly distributed economic, social and community activities is changing our society and business as a result. Remote and flexible working means we no longer need to be clustered around such large urban centres, and we're seeing this move to distribution, to moving away from the big urban centres for some of the reasons we've been talking about today, the infrastructure choke points that we create. Digital transformation empowers a personalised and on-demand economy. This is now normal. This is the new normal that we have to adapt to. And again, it's been touched on earlier, but legacy networks, airports, and airlines, infrastructure constraints, we bottle everything into these choke points, and we really need to work out a way of getting around that if we're to if we're to make the lives of these people better. According to Amex, they run an ongoing study on business travel. Last year, business travel expenditure is consistently rising. Last year it was 3.1% against a forecast of 2.5%. When looking at buyer priorities, other than safety and security, the highest priority was, when considering business travel, was actually efficiency and productivity of the traveller. Again, think about that while we're talking. IATA estimates that worldwide premium cabin travel accounts for between 5 to 8% of total air passenger travel. In Europe, that equates to around 175 million premium cabin journeys per year. 2018 itself saw a 5% year-on-year growth for premium cabin business travel in Europe. So go back to that first point there. Other than safety and security, efficiency and productivity are the highest priorities. Which of course makes perfect sense. You want maximum value, as a travel buyer, if you're buying travel for your team to move around, you want them to be efficient, you want maximum value for your money. Go back to the picture of a happy-go-lucky business traveller. He's probably had a couple of hours journey to the airport. I don't know where he lives, but the chances are he's a couple of hours away from the airport, overland travel, could have been stuck on the motorway, could have been on the train. He's had a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours in the airport queue of one variety or another. He's probably got a flight, 1 or 2 hours, depending on where he's actually going at the end of the day. And it's not over then, because he's still got to get to his final destination from the airport he's arrived at. So there we go, arriving 6 to 9 hours after he left, sharp, focused, and ready to do business. Really? Is anybody going to be in that sort of position at the end of that day? And of course, by then, look at the hours in the day. The business day is done. So whoever's paid that bill has already paid for an entire day of that time. The productivity, the value has gone, it's spent. And of course, he's not going to get back today because there aren't enough hours in the day, so he's stuck in a hotel for the night, dinner for 1, dinner for 2, whoever he's meeting. All of that goes into this sort of expense. And again, look at this equation of value and value and cost. Think for a moment about a traveller. I'm sure all of us here have enjoyed enough similar experiences in our own business lives to know that business travel is rarely a luxury or a perk. Think for a moment about the next, and then think for a moment about the next generation. They're potentially far more conscious and demanding of work-life balance and indeed wellness. This sort of cycle of business travel has to have an impact on an individual's well-being. In a world where getting the right talent into your business is a challenge, then the winners will be those businesses that learn to best look after their people, making them feel valued. How valued does this guy feel right now? So let's look at the options available to the traveller. Is there anybody from British Airways in the room? If so, I apologise. Please don't take away my privilege card. Airlines. It's been said earlier on, taking you where they want to take you and not necessarily where you want to go. In simple terms, airlines are driven by route economics. An airline can only fly to a destination when it has a reasonable chance of consistently filling at least a third or so of its seats on a given route. They rely on utilisation, yield and revenue management, and increasingly overpriced sandwiches and coffee in order to cover their costs and to generate some revenue. This also feeds traditional airline hub and spoke models and forces, we go back to that point, it's forcing travellers back into these infrastructure choke points, which of course are entirely there for the convenience of the airport and the airline, and not, of course, the traveller, who most of those would rather not be there. Low-cost airlines, as soon as open skies became a thing, low-cost airlines flourished rapidly. They changed the story. They were incredibly successful in challenging models. They were clearly able to compete on price very quickly. And but that, like all things, buying something on the cheap comes with a certain level of compromise. That was probably, in some cases, schedule flexibility. How many times have we done the 0430 check-in whilst the British Airways or the American Airlines flight does the sensible 7:30 check-in. But you get what you achieve a cheaper flight. Flexibility can always be added to price tickets, but of course that also comes at a price. Legacy airlines are restricted in their ability to compete with low-cost rivals. On cost terms alone, they have such a bigger cost base. They do offer greater schedule flexibility, clearly, but this also assumes that you only ever want to travel between one city to the other city and nowhere in between. They try and trap us in their networks or alliances, loyalty programs and privileges, speedy boarding being one of the famous ones. And the executive lounge is generally a poor attempt at polishing a really unattractive product. I would argue that in short-haul terms, there's almost no value at all or any tangible benefit from airline loyalty or executive cards. There is, of course, another option already in the market, business or private aviation. Total flexibility, unrivaled comfort and prestige. But all that, of course, again, comes at a price, and in this case, a high price. There are some of my colleagues in the room who will no doubt testify how tough it can be to make money in the private aviation, especially at the light jet end of the business. And in fact, for the purposes of today, I'm really focusing on that light jet segment as opposed to the medium and the longer range aircraft. Of course, private aviation, it's a high cost, low volume and low margin business. Really, when has that ever been a winner on a consistent basis? It's a massively fragmented market where consolidation, at least at the bottom end of the market, has arguably not delivered any real appreciable benefits. Hampered by a luxury lifestyle image and marketing to match, the champagne, the caviar, the shiny offices in Mayfair or Geneva, the picture of the perfect, beautiful people climbing the aircraft steps with the sunset just in the right position as the chauffeur deals with the bags We've all seen that sort of imagery. And of course, that has a market, but that market isn't the business traveller. The industry even chooses to show itself off, to demonstrate its low-cost credentials by having an annual event to show itself to the world. We do that in Geneva, one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's not compatible with this sort of business traveller product. And at its heart, private aviation is a business model largely created to alleviate the needs of aircraft owners by offsetting their ownership costs with charter revenue. Yeah, right. Allowing the operator only to scrape a percentage or a small management fee for their travel. I haven't even mentioned the environment. Whatever the actual reality of aviation's carbon emissions, we cannot, and nor should we, overlook it. The optics around aviation, particularly private aviation, and the environment are not great. And as an industry, we really need to get better at presenting our story to the world. Carbon conscience is a reality that is now starting to impact on air travel. In fact, only last week in Sweden, some new data was published which says that in the Swedish market, there has been a real decline in both business and leisure flying, which has been directly attributed to passengers' reluctance to fly on the basis of the perceived damage caused by the environment, caused to the environment by aviation. So, time for some Revolution.Aero, or at least some blue sky thinking, as the slide will suggest. We need to look at that audience, we need to look at that purpose. We stand at the gates of an opportunity, actually opportunities, I would argue. Technology offers us the keys and potentially allows us as an industry to take another step forward, truly moving passengers to the centre of the value chain, giving them a real reason to use the product, and of course, providing the industry with a new audience. Let's not also forget the resulting environmental benefits. And really, we do have to put that at the front and centre of what we're talking about to the world. Business aviation should not just be a dirty little secret for the high net worths of the world. It should have real impact and practical purpose, truly delivering value to businesses, whilst actually also making sense as a profitable business. Democratising and lowering the costs of business travel, making new destinations and experiences affordable for those who could not have accessed them previously, either by jet charter or scheduled airline services. A hybrid electric-powered network. Let's draw a line under how long we will take that to, how long we think that will happen in terms of market entrance. But whatever's clear, that has to be at scale. It has to be driven by data. We have to understand the increasingly distributed nature of passengers. It's not now just about transport between London, be it Heathrow, be it Gatwick, and Munich or Vienna or whichever city we're talking about. Those passengers aren't coming from anywhere near though. Those passengers are being sucked into that infrastructure choke point. Data, if we look at data availability now, allows us to track where those passengers actually are. Once we work out where those passengers are originating from, then we can cut, as the gentleman from Lisa said earlier, we cut that whole corner off. We no longer have this 3 hours journey to the airport. We no longer have the queue at the airport. We go to a local airport, we cut the corner and arrive exactly where we want to be and not where the airline wanted to take us. Predictive analysis of that same data. So we move from a scenario where the data is at first powering our marketing communications, it's allowing us to tell the story to these new passengers. It's allowing them to bring them to our product. We then have that same data utilised to actually predict and optimise the network. Of course, we need to do this against a background of low-cost airline management. Why do we need all that excess cost in the business? Low-cost management, discipline and practices. High availability, high utilisation. We've spoken about this many times at many points over the years in business aviation, and it's always been difficult to do because of the capital required to enter the market. But maybe now if we look at the fundamental differences we're going to have in those operating costs to the model, and we look about the availability of new technology, it gives us that opportunity. Of course, we should clearly state that it has to be greener by design, changing the story of aviation and its impact on the environment. That's a really important thing for us and for future generations. And as I would say, and to tie in with the theme of the conference, it really is a revolution in the making, and actually it should deliver power to the people. Thank you very much.